Prije tjedan dana započeli smo razgovor s Davidom Ickeom, autorom desetak knjiga u kojima je nastojao pokazati zakulisne postupke i namjere kojima se upravlja svjetskim zbivanjima s određenim ciljem. Brzo je prošlo tih 127 sati i evo nas opet natrag. S obzirom na to da ono što će sutra postati povijest nastaje na temelju interpretacije današnjih događaja, svaki informirani revizionizam dobro je došao, jer opreza nikad dosta. Slijede daljnje revizionističke minute nekih neranih događaja. Ovdje, na Rubu Znanosti. Dobro večer. U prošloj emisiji započeli smo dakle jedan razgovor koji nismo završili, to ćemo učiniti danas, mada on zapravo skoro da i ne može završiti s obzirom na brzinu zbivanja oko nas. To je razgovor o prirodi zbivanja oko nas na temelju premise o centraliziranoj kontroli informacija, financija, političkog odlučivanja, koje nam se naravno kroz medije uglavnom predstavljaju kao svoja suprotnost. Drugim riječima, jedno se priča, a drugo se radi, gledaš crno, a neko ti govori da je to bijelo i slično. To drugo, što se radi prema našem gostu Davidu Ickeu, koračenje je ne baš više niti skriveno prema svjetskoj totalitarnoj državi. Danas ćemo prošetati kroz nekoliko najnovijih događaja u zadnjih godinu i pol dana i usporediti što se u njima doista događalo, a što zapravo se i kako predstavljalo. Dobro večer.
Halo.
Jedan od zanimljivih tekstova kojima ste se bavili u proteklih godinu dana bio je onaj kada je glavna udarna vijest u svim medijima naravno bilo ubojstvo ili umorstvo Osame bin Ladena. To je još jedan primjer u kojoj skoro da čovjek ne zna koji podatak bi uopće mogao naći točan, na koji način i što smatrate da se zapravo događalo i zbog čega cijela ta čudnovata priča o glavnom teroristu koji se potom baci u more preko palube prema nepostojaćem islamskom običaju i slično. Jel Osama bin Laden umro prije, u novije vrijeme, zbog čega bi se takva jedna farsa odvijala ispred naših očiju?
Well, I can sum up Osama bin Laden's death in Pakistan in one way. And I think they're going to have a movie version of his killing, and they're going to call it You Only Die Twice. Amazing how you can do that. To really understand the bin Laden situation, you have to go back to the man that we talked about in the last program in relation to this global conspiracy and being a mentor of Obama, Zbigniew Brzezinski. When he was Jimmy Carter's national security advisor, he ran Carter's foreign policy. It was famous that within the administration, when Carter was ever asked anything about foreign policy, he said, "What does Brzezinski think about it?" And so he instigated what became the Mujahideen and the Taliban in Afghanistan. And that's not me saying that, that's him saying that. He did an interview some years ago with a French news magazine, in which he said that he had embarked upon a policy to what he called give the Soviet Union their Vietnam. Of course, at that time in the 80s, we still had the Soviet Union. And they had a satellite government in Kabul, probably a good slip of the tongue then, Kabul in Afghanistan. And so what Brzezinski said he wanted to do was to start trouble for that satellite government in Afghanistan by training and arming, see present times in Libya and Syria, by arming these freedom fighters that became known as Mujahideen to make life difficult for the government in Kabul. Because what he wanted to do, he said, was entice the Soviet Union to invade Afghanistan to protect their satellite government and thus get embroiled in a long war, which is exactly what happened. And so when the Soviet Union, took the bait and went in, they wanted a figurehead, the Americans, Brzezinski and what followed him with Reagan Bush. They wanted a figurehead that could be, the name around which the resistance to the occupation of the Soviet Union could be promoted. And so onto the scene comes Osama bin Laden on the CIA payroll, fronting up the leadership of the Mujahideen, which eventually became the Taliban, or part of it did. And of course, you had the 10-year civil war and occupation in Afghanistan, and eventually the Soviet Union were forced out, and 1 million Afghans died, and never mind the Soviet troops as well. And then you had the Mujahideen, and then becoming the Taliban. You had that now in place. And there was this morphing, eventually, from Osama bin Laden being the pin-up boy of the Americans, leading up the resistance to the Soviet Union in Afghanistan, to becoming numero uno terrorist. And he, of course, was blamed for 9/11, which is a joke, a fantasy beyond fantasies when you actually do a modicum of research into the official story of 9/11. It was obviously an inside job involving American military and intelligence, definitely Mossad, massive involvement, and British intelligence would have been there somewhere, and always is. And so he got the rap, if you like, for being this villain terrorist, just to hide the fact that the real people were behind it. And also by blaming Osama bin Laden, who was said to be located in Afghanistan, now they've got the excuse, problem, reaction, solution to invade Afghanistan. And so this happened, and we're going to get bin Laden. Remember, we're going to get bin Laden. That was Boy Bush's mantra immediately after 9/11. And then suddenly, he disappears. Every now and again, he will appear on a video. Videos, by the way, these videos of bin Laden that they put out into the media every little while, ever since 9/11. They were put into the media network by a lady called Rita Katz, who is the daughter of a Mossad agent. And she runs an organization called SITE. And there's another Israeli who runs an organization called Intel Center in America. And they're both Mossad fronts. And they're the organizations that have been putting these videos out of Osama bin Laden. And the thing to remember, as I emphasize these days, is computer graphics and voice recognition technology that can make a voice sound like someone else's if you've got the frequency. And of course, you've only got to have a recording of the person who've got the frequency. Are so sophisticated now that literally you cannot believe your eyes and ears when you're looking at some of this stuff. But putting a bin Laden video together after he's died, making threats to the West, piece of cake. If people go to my website, davidicke.com, they'll find some videos there just showing actors, regular actors in Hollywood, doing their scene next to a blue screen or a green screen behind them, nothing else. And then you'll see the actual film of that dialogue. And they're in a street.
Kada je Osama bin Laden umro onda?
Well, as I was saying, these videos have been put out and they've perpetuated the myth that he was still alive. Now, it's very clear, and indeed this has appeared in the mainstream media, that bin Laden had very, very serious kidney disease, malfunction. And it was reported in the mainstream media in the summer of 2001 that he was having dialysis treatment at the American hospital in Dubai and was visited by the CIA station chief in Dubai. I mean, if he's this villain that they say he is, and this master bloody terrorist, then why don't they just take him out there? Why don't they just pick him up there? And it's very clear that he had very serious problems and needed dialysis treatment. And the former president of Pakistan, Musharraf, he said that bin Laden was dead. Benazir Bhutto, the former prime minister of Pakistan, said in an interview with a guy called David Frost in England, America, that he was dead. And then when he was supposed to have died for the second time, a man in America called Steve Pieczenik, who has served at a very significant level in a number of American administrations, he went public and said, this is nonsense, what they're saying about the shooting of bin Laden, because he said, we knew that bin Laden died in 2001 from kidney failure. And in fact, not just kidney failure, he was more specific. He said bin Laden died from something called Marfan syndrome. Marfan syndrome is something that is genetic, inherited, and one of the traits of Marfan syndrome is the long face and the long limbs, which is exactly what bin Laden had. And it attacks the connecting tissue of the body, and it causes something else, severe and potentially fatal kidney malfunction. So we started to see why he had this kidney situation going. And there was a report in an Egyptian newspaper of his funeral in 2001. Then if you fast forward to when he's supposed to have been shot in the compound, actually it was a house, but compound sounds scary, so we'll call it a compound. When they announced this, and I'd stopped laughing, which took some time, I'm waiting for a mention in the compound of dialysis equipment, dialysis machines, not to mention, until eventually there was one, in the context of they didn't find any. So here's a man who needed he had an extreme kidney problem which needed dialysis treatment regularly. And somehow he's been in this compound for 5 years without any dialysis equipment, because they're saying he never left. And then they're saying that the CIA were kind of keeping surveillance on this compound, and they kept seeing this man who they called the pacer in this ridiculous story, walking around the garden with a walking stick and stuff like that. And they thought, ooh, we thought it was bin Laden, but we weren't. You weren't sure. With the technology of surveillance you have in the sky that can take a number plate from space and you don't know it's bin Laden, it's a fantasy. And then, of course, when they said they killed him with these Navy SEALs, okay, show us the body. Show us. Oh, no, we can't show you the body because he was buried at sea according to Muslim custom. Muslim custom, buried at sea. Yeah, it's great if you live in the middle of Saudi Arabia, isn't it? Bit of a problem. But anyway, so we've not got any body. Okay, what a surprise. Okay, show us the pictures. Oh, no, we're not showing the pictures because they're not very nice and we don't do things like that. Well, you did with Saddam Hussein's sons, blood and gore, when they were dead and all that stuff. Because the reason they're not showing us the pictures is because there aren't any. Because he died in 2001. And it's no coincidence that a few weeks, maybe a bit more than that, but not long, after bin Laden was killed by these Navy SEALs, according to the official story, that a number of Navy SEALs from the same group that's supposed to have killed bin Laden died in a helicopter crash. Now, if you, in Afghanistan now, if you look at the way the American military manipulates information in times of conflict and war and stuff, you will very, very rarely, if ever, see them, unless they can't hide it, admit that the enemy has had a victory against them, like shooting at one of the helicopters down. They'll say it was friendly fire, or they'll say it was a mechanical failure. They won't admit that the enemy's, had a victory. what they did when those Navy SEALs died in the helicopter crash is they immediately came out and said it was shot down by the Taliban. Why? They never killed bin Laden, those Navy SEALs, but they also knew that bin Laden wasn't killed because they weren't involved in it. And so you want to remove any danger that someone on the inside who knows is actually going to, at some point, talk about it. And then you had the famous picture of Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama and all those people sitting around the table with the switched-off laptops, looking in that direction, you know. And it went around the world immediately because, you know, as I've said so many times, the idea is not to inform people, it's to sell them an image. So immediately you say that something has happened, you then keep banging out things that support that story. So you say that Obama and Hillary Clinton and all these people in the administration were there watching live footage of bin Laden being shot. Well, and there's Hillary Clinton like that. Oh. And then you find out they had to admit it a few days later. There was no live footage of bin Laden being shot. Not least because he wasn't shot. But the question is, so what were they looking at? I mean, was Hillary Clinton kind of anxious about a crack in the wall? I mean, what's going on? What were they looking at? And now we see from this situation that they set them up in the room, told them where to look and how to look, and then took this fake picture and put it out as if they're watching live footage that they had to admit later didn't exist. This is the scale of manipulation of world events that we're dealing with. These people have no shame. Then we had this footage released of this of Osama bin Laden changing the television channel. No. We didn't see Osama bin Laden. We saw a guy with a beard and a hat. And bin Laden was seriously left-handed, and this guy's changing the channels with his right hand. And if you remember, as he's changing the channels, he's on every one. Now, somebody just work out the statistical chances that bin Laden would be flicking through television channels and everyone would be him. Have you ever flicked through television channels in any country in the world that many times and not hit the adverts? or another program? I mean, it's oh my goodness me! They must think we're totally stupid. And then they say they found this new footage, and then you look at it and you find it's old footage that they're calling new footage. And the whole story was just an absolute tissue of ludicrous lies. But here's the real kind of punchline. You look at any news organisation anywhere in the world, mainstream, newspaper, radio, television, or for virtually any of them anywhere in the world, and if they are doing anything on bin Laden, they'll say that he was shot by Navy SEALs in a compound in Pakistan. I mean, when the whole idea is absolutely ludicrous, just as they'll give you the official story of 9/11 when you know, a 14-year-old could take it apart. Mm-hmm. And some of them have, because it's so blatantly a tissue of lies. This is what we're dealing with, and I don't know whether they are getting more and more overconfident, or whether they're just getting more lax, or whether it's because I'm understanding more about how they work all the time. But it's just so blatantly obvious the way they're lying to us. But the mainstream media, who should be in there straight away, hold on a second, what do you mean you're not giving us the pictures? What do you mean Muslim custom? None of it. Repeaters, that's what they are, repeaters. Repeating the official story for the public.
Koji bi bio razlog za navodnu smrt bin Ladena 2000 i krajem prvog desetljeća 21. stoljeća?
Well, there would have been a number of reasons, but I mean, I'll tell you one reason, which has become blatantly obvious. I said it at the time, and it's becoming more obvious now. It was the real start of the process of demonizing Pakistan, because they were saying that Pakistan cannot be trusted as an ally in the war against terror, as they call it. when they must have known that bin Laden was in the compound, because it just happened to be near a military base, just a coincidence, nothing to worry about. And thus, we must treat them in a different way. And all these neocons in America, like David Frum, who was the Bush speechwriter who came up with the phrase, the axis of evil, Iran, Iraq and North Korea, he came out immediately after the bin Laden non-killing, saying, hey, we must completely change our policy towards Pakistan now. And since that, since that non-death of bin Laden in Pakistan, they have upped the ante in terms of the drone attacks on Pakistan. They've killed thousands of civilians in Pakistan. And what does Pakistan have a border with? China, which is where, as we talked last time, which is where, in line with Russia, they want to bring those two countries into a third world war with the NATO countries. And of course, that area there, Pakistan and Afghanistan, all around there, is absolutely in that central area where this conflict is designed to take place, or not to be triggered out of.
Vratit ćemo se na kino malo kasnije. Jednom je američki komičar Jerry Seinfeld rekao kako je nevjerojatno kako na svijetu postoji točno toliko vijesti da se popune jedne novine. To je dosta dobar pokazatelj da se naravno vijesti biraju količinom, ali i sadržajem. Ono što se ne izvještava ne znači da je završilo, mada nam se može činiti. Konkretan slučaj takvog jednog problema koji je bio aktualan, a više nije, jest katastrofa u Japanu, o kojoj ste također intenzivno pisali, danas više ne spominje. Mada radijacija i dalje curi i staljene jezgre su ušle u podzemne vode, u more i slično, i bilo bi dobro možda ne kupovati 24.000 godina japanske proizvode i hranu i slično. Situacija u Japanu nas zapravo dovodi u vezu sa još jednim pojmom koji je nekima poznat, a nekima ne. To je HRT, jedno oružje geotektonsko i sa više zapravo namjena, čak i za manipulaciju umom i slično, koje je možda već je korišteno u zadnjih nekoliko godina u Haitiju i negdje drugdje. Kakva je vaša rekonstrukcija događaja u Japanu? Što se doista zbilo po vama i s kojim ciljem?
Well, for many, many years now, I've been ticking off the ever-increasing sources of radiation to which humans are subjected. And they are so numerous and being added to all the time. It was very clear to me that there is an agenda here of subjecting humanity to more and more radiation. It's a long story and there's many, many elements to why, but the fact that they're doing it is becoming obvious. And so when the explosions at Fukushima happened in Japan, from my perspective, having looked at this over a number of years, it was just too much of a gift to this cabal, given the scale, the stunning scale of radiation that not only was released immediately, but has gone on being released ever since. And, you know, there's reports recently out of Europe of finding these high levels of radiation. And it's like, where's it coming from? Well, there's a very good chance of where it's coming from, because Fukushima has been pouring this stuff out incessantly, day after day after day. So I started looking into it. And one of the first things I noticed, and other people started looking at this as well, was that the explosion that was captured on video of one of the reactors exploding in Fukushima, and the explosion, the smoke stack of a small nuclear device were extraordinarily similar. So I then started looking at anything that could have explained this. And I came across the fact that in the years leading up to Fukushima, those reactors and that site in general had installed a new surveillance camera and sensor system with this technology put into the reactors and other parts of the site. And when you look at it, you know today that technology is getting ever lighter, it's getting ever smaller. And yet, when you looked at these cameras and sensors that were installed into Fukushima in the months before this happened, they were like ludicrous. You remember, you get these little tiny kind of mobile phones now. And yet, when mobile phones started, they were about that big, and you're as old as you here with two hands, you know. Well, that was the kind of difference between the kind of surveillance technology you see normally now and these things. They weighed 1,000 pounds. And then, when you put one of those next to what they call a gun-type nuclear weapon, which is a small nuclear device, if you take the casing off the gun-type nuclear weapon, what is inside is, shall we say, not a million miles from what these cameras and sensors look like. And it was, with other information, it was my view, I concluded, that these were small nuclear devices and that Fukushima was blown up on purpose to release that radiation as part of this much wider radiation agenda to irradiate the atmosphere of the planet much more than it has been up to this point. And then I asked, of course, it asked the question, who put these devices in, these sensors in? And it turns out to be an Israeli company located at Dimona in Israel. And Dimona is the location of the massive Israeli nuclear weapons program. And I can tell you from 22 years of research, there is no such thing as an Israeli security company that is not a front for Mossad. It's not allowed. And then there was a man called Arnie Gunderson, who's a nuclear engineer. And he made a speech in Boston. And it was almost like an alert. It was like, hey, we found something about Fukushima which should not have happened. And this has great implications for containment design and nuclear design. And what he'd found from the footage is that the explosions at Fukushima moved so fast that they passed the speed of sound and entered the realm of what is known as a detonation wave. And as he pointed out, a nuclear explosion at a nuclear plant like that should never, ever become a detonation wave. It produces what they call a deflagration wave, which is below the speed of sound. And his alert was, hey, we had no idea this was possible. He says, I've talked to a bunch of chemists and we can't work out how it is possible for a nuclear explosion at a plant like that to cause a detonation wave. Well, maybe it wasn't a nuclear explosion of that kind that caused the detonation wave, but a device designed to detonate. And it is my strong view that Fukushima was blown up on purpose to release this stunning level of radiation. And then, of course, the question comes, okay, so you're saying they put these things in and blew it up, and then they just sit around strumming their fingers, hoping that some kind of earthquake and tsunami comes along as cover for it. Well, no, which is when we come to what you've just mentioned, HAARP. And HAARP relates to a man very well known in this area of the world, Nikola Tesla. Nikola Tesla was the scientific genius of the 20th century, and if he was alive today, he'd be the scientific genius probably of the first part of the 21st century. He had understood many things about the nature of our reality. He'd understood about the electromagnetic fields that you can access and turn into usable warmth and power, which the cabal that owns the energy industry of the world has been suppressing because it doesn't want people to have access to this free energy, which we could have. And by the way, the same people who are saying we must lower carbon emissions because of global warming, which is another nonsense, this human-caused global warming lie. They're the same people that are suppressing the development of use of free energy technology, which Tesla developed and understood, which could eliminate the carbon power systems, immediately. So it's all a lie. But what HARP does is it fires radio waves, very, very focused and very powerful, into the upper atmosphere known as the ionosphere, and it entrains, as they say. It gets the ionosphere to vibrate in sympathy with the radio wave. And this creates a situation where this entrainment adds massive, massive, massive power to the original radio wave, and then it's bounced back to Earth, massively greater power, and they can hit a specific spot on the Earth. And if they can hit somewhere which is vulnerable in terms of earthquakes anyway, and they can do it at a specific frequency, because the earthquakes have a frequency like everything does, then they can cause an earthquake and they can cause a tsunami. And they can cause, with the same principle, they can cause very great extremes of weather, like hundreds of unprecedented tornadoes that appeared in 2007 and killed hundreds of people in America. And, people say, oh, no, you can't mess with the weather, it's ridiculous. Well, hold on a second. There are international treaties which countries have signed saying that it's illegal to manipulate the weather and to use it as a weapon of war. Well, they're not going to have those treaties unless they know it's possible. It's ridiculous. And so we have a situation where, yes, of course there are natural earthquakes, but they don't all have to be. And you can bomb somewhere from an aircraft, or you can cause devastating earthquakes and devastating weather events, and you can bring the countries to their knees that way. And in many ways, people within countries, many of them anyway, within the establishment, they know that Fukushima and that earthquake and tsunami and everything, they know it was created. It wasn't a natural event. And what that says to them, and what they're saying to them with that event is, if you say no to us, look what we can do. If they want to bring Japan to its knees, they've got to find a way, like they did in with the two, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, at the end of the Second World War. But today they would have to find an excuse to send the boys in. Well, they can't find an excuse. So instead of that, we'll go the way that they have, because Japan is over. It's over. The amount of radiation that has been released into the Earth's atmosphere is potentially catastrophic. The amount that's been released in the immediate area around Japan and the wider Japan is unthinkably catastrophic. And we people are already starting to go down with the effects of it, and we've seen nothing yet. This was you have these James Bond movies, written by a British intelligence agent, by the way, where you have the guy on the island with the fantastic technology, or the guy with the satellite in the sky that can, cause devastation on Earth. And he holds the world to ransom on the basis of I won't use it only if you do this. Blackmail. Well, this is what's happening in the real world because of this technology that they have. And, Tesla, in an interview with the New York Times in the 1940s, I think it was, maybe a bit earlier, he said that he had the technology to split the Earth in half then. He was producing lightning around his home in New York. The neighbors were calling the police. He was causing kind of mini earthquakes, getting the Earth to shake because of the technology he had, and thousands of windows were breaking before he could switch it off. And Bernard Eastland, the man who applied, first of all, for the patent for the technology that is used in HARP, based in Alaska, but there's connecting technology all around the world. That's just the main focal point. He mentions Tesla when he's applying for the patent. It's Tesla technology. And if Tesla could, do that devastation he said he could do back in the 1930s and 40s, what the heck can they do now? So instead of, it's not really a case of, what do you mean they can cause earthquakes? That's crazy. No. Causing earthquakes is a piece of cake for this technology. And thus, you have a situation in 2010 when in the run-up to it, in the years running up to 2010 around Haiti, it was established that there were major resources under the sea in Haiti waters. In 2010, this devastating earthquake brings the end to Haiti. It just so happened, that the American military were having an exercise at exactly the same time that was based on a scenario of reacting to, I think it was a hurricane or something like that, hitting Haiti. And they were down in Florida doing their exercise. And then the earthquake happened and they said, we just switched from exercise to real thing. And they were in there in no time. And if you remember, the aid agencies that were trying to land in Port-au-Prince in Haiti, they were saying in the immediate days after the earthquake, the American military have taken over the airport, so they're not letting us in. They took the place over. And then along came Clinton and Boy Bush as the people that were going to front up the Haiti Reconstruction Fund, and then they disappeared, and Haiti, virtually nothing's been done, because the idea was to destroy Haiti, take it over, because then you've got the resources. And you can do that with an earthquake. How are they going to justify destroying Haiti by dropping bombs on it? I mean, they're not going to do it. But you can do it through HARP and earthquakes. And the weather wars and the geological wars are not some science fiction fantasy. They're happening now.
Kada ste spominjali taj plan vezan uz trovanje ljudi koji ima puno svojih aspekata, i zaslađivača aspartam, i fluorid u američkoj vodi, i naravno ovim vodama koje kupujemo u dućanu i slično. Ima jedna situacija u kojoj se ljudi često pitaju, čini im se da se to negdje daleko događa. Radijacija, može pasti i na glavu s neba, međutim, postoji jedna točka u kojoj je ideja zapravo vrlo teško se može izbjeći i doslovce vas može dočekati u vašoj sobi. To su konkretno ovaj trend štednih žarulja, takozvanih, koje su se pokazale iznimno opasnima za zdravlje, osim što su iznimno skupe, osim što ne štede struju, zato jer trebaju povući puno struje dok se zagriju, osim što daju svjetlost slabog spektra, koja je daleko inferiornija ovim starim žaruljama. Međutim, malo ljudi zna da u EU su stare žarulje, one od 3 kune sa žarnom niti, koja je najsličnija prirodnoj svjetlosti, jer žari, stavljeni izvan zakona. Pa zato na granici Hrvatske i Slovenije gdje živim, Slovenaca često koji kupuju kutije tih žarulja. Kako se te žarulje uklapaju, s obzirom da je to još jedan proglas Europske unije, zakon te države u kojoj navodno moramo ući zato jer je tamo carstvo razuma, pravde i demokracije. Međutim, to je nešto što svatko ipak može utjecati jer je u njegovoj dnevnoj sobi.
Well, people dismiss things by reflex action, and if they only took a deep breath and looked at it again, they'd see the validity of it and the stupidity of their dismissal. For instance, I hear people say, "Whoa, organic food, what do you mean? It's fine. So, you're saying that organically grown food that does not have poisons sprayed on it incessantly is no better and no different from this food that does have poisons sprayed on it incessantly. They must tell earthling jokes on other planets. They must really. It's like, let's just think about this. You grow food, you spray lethal poisons on it. You then sell it in the shops, and people eat it. I mean, what? And thus, when they're putting poisons and chemicals and additives in food, they're putting fluoride in water. They want to put lithium in water now. The happy drug, basically. So we'll love our servitude, as the old saying goes. And we are being hit by these things all the time. And the question, and genetically modified food, which is designed to genetically modify us. And so the question is, why are they doing it? Why are they putting these poisons in food? When I grew up as a kid in England in the 1950s, they didn't do it then. Why are they doing it now? Why do they put growth hormones into they inject them into cattle and animals, and to make them fatter quicker? And people say, oh yeah, well that's to make them fatter quicker so that they'll make more money. Yes, but when you eat the meat, it's still got the growth hormone in it. No wonder people are getting obese. And this is happening. And we need really, if we're going to understand our situation, to realise that there is an agenda here for a massive attack on humans mentally, emotionally and physically. And a lot of it's done through these poisons in the food and drink. But you raise another aspect, which is so important, which is these light bulbs. I have written extensively about these in a book called Remember Who You Are. This is out in early 2012. And I talk about them, in my events, because whenever you have a situation where something is patently ludicrous to pursue, but they still pursue it, despite how ridiculous it is, then it's time to look, because it's the agenda at work. For instance, the idea about human-caused climate change is a scientific, it's scientific imbecility, and yet, even though it's been demolished, and more scientists that at one time were in favour of it are coming out and saying, actually, it's a nonsense, the political policy is still pushing on as if it's real. Why? Because it's just an excuse. And one of the things that they have used this excuse to impose upon people increasingly are these twiddly so-called green light bulbs. Now, let's look at this from it's ludicrous, but they still push it on perspective. These light bulbs, first of all, the light they give off is absolutely rubbish. They don't give off a light anything like those of the incandescent light bulbs that we've had up to this point. And it was just great to come to my hotel in Zagreb, and I look in the light bulbs in the room, as I always do, to see what they are, and they were incandescent, yes. Because I've been on a tour through Australia and New Zealand and America. These bloody twiddly things are everywhere, right? And they say they save energy. They don't if you switch them on and off. And have you noticed that's what you tend to do with light bulbs? You switch them on and off. Well, when you do often, they're not even more energetically efficient. Then you look, and this has been scientifically shown to be in experiments, they give off radiation, here we go again, and lethal chemicals cumulatively. There are people who have got as close to them as they would to a normal light with no problem, and suddenly they've got massive rashes on their face that are there for permanently. They will not go away. And then there's just the little matter that these light bulbs contain mercury. And mercury is absolutely lethal. In Remember Who You Are, when I'm talking about these light bulbs, I print in full the British kind of safety manual for what you do if one of these things breaks. And it's everything virtually short of evacuate the building. It's extraordinary what they say you have to do if one of these things breaks, which light bulbs tend to do. And there was a woman in America, they want to make them compulsory there, starting through beyond 2012. But of course, they've got lots of people now think, well, I'll be green and I'll put these light bulbs in. Well, she bought some, and one of them broke in her daughter's bedroom. So she then called Home Depot, where she bought them from, and asked what she did. And they said, well, you better call the state government, which she did. And they said, well, you're going to have to call this company in to basically clean up the poison, the toxic mess. $2,000 she was charged to clean up the effects of one of these light bulbs in one room in her house. And if you go on the internet and you put in words to the effect of, green light bulbs, consequences, dangers, anything like the words like that, you'll see story after story of the health effects in many, many different ways of these bulbs. So you put all that together and you think the idea of using these bulbs is crazy. Okay. But they've gone on beyond that in the European Union, and they're doing this in other parts of the world. They're not encouraging you only to use these bulbs. They're telling you you must, and they're banning, they have banned in European Union, the alternatives. You're not allowed to produce them, import them, etc. any longer. So it's like fluoride in the water. Mm-hmm. This substance they use in rat poison and mind-changing drugs. If you say, OK, we encourage you to use it, fluoride, because it's good for your teeth. It absolutely isn't. It's terrible for your teeth, not least through fluorosis. But they don't do that. They put it in your drinking water. So you haven't got a choice unless you use bottled water. And thus, why are they forcing it upon people instead of just encouraging them? Because it's the agenda to poison us and in terms of the light bulbs, there's another agenda too. But so you've got the situation where the light bulbs give off rubbish light, and when they break, they're lethal and all the rest of it. And when you think, just take the American example, at any point in America, there are billions and billions of light bulbs. When they come to the end of their life, in terms of the incandescent ones, well, you put them on a tip or wherever they go. Or if they break, you get a brush and dustpan and you just sweep them up. End of story, gone, fine. What about when, and we're doing it in Europe already, you have billions and billions of these light bulbs containing mercury? What they're saying in these must-do blooming safety things, manuals, is when these bulbs come to the end of their life, they have to be disposed of as toxic waste. Well, of course, most people aren't going to do that and go through all the toxic waste procedure of getting rid of a light bulb. They're going to go in the tips, in the landfill tips, and they're going to break, and the mercury is going to go into the water supply and the groundwater supply. So all this is absolutely ludicrous. So why are they pushing on with it and enforcing it upon people? Well, this is why. And some people might find this strange, but hear me out. What they are is transmitters of information. And they connect into something that I'm seeing increasingly all over the world, and wherever it's introduced, the people are saying, this is terrible, we don't want this, you've got to have this. And that is smart meters, electricity meters, which is part of what they want to be a global grid of electricity supply, which they're calling the smart grid. They want the smart grids in every country, and the country smart grids connecting to all the other smart grids to have a global grid. And how it works, for people who haven't come across it, and it's being enforced all over the world, not least in the European Union. They want 80% of the European Union, I think it's by 2020, with these smart meters, for reasons I'm going to come to. They create these smart meters. They generate the equivalent in your home of the wireless internet. So what is that? That's yet another field of radiation in your home and your business, which you're subjected to 24/7 once these things happen and are introduced. And this smart grid wireless internet is designed to interact with what they want to bring in, which is microchip domestic appliances like fridges and heaters and stuff like that. And this is not me, you know, or I think this is happening. I am quoting their own documents, their own public documents here. They will have a situation where they can turn your heating down from a central point. You won't have any choice in that. They turn it down whenever they want. They can turn your electricity off from a distance. They can turn your fridge off. They can know when your fridge door's open. Because of the way the information field, because that's what it is, picks up things, they'll know how many people are in your house and even what rooms they're in. It's a surveillance operation, massive surveillance operation, which will feed all this information to a central point. Now, it's not just a surveillance operation, but it's most certainly that. It's also about feeding you in your home and business subliminal information within the frequency range of human brain activity, so that you take this stuff and you decode it through the electrical system of the brain, if you like, and you think you're having your own thoughts, your own perceptions, when what you're doing is reading and becoming influenced by this subliminal information. And this is where these light bulbs come in. I quote in Remember Who You Are and in my events, scientists who've done research into the effect of what they call ELF waves, extremely low frequency waves, and how they can manipulate us mentally, emotionally, and physically. There was one particular area of research into something called the woodpecker signal. People might remember this, when the Soviet Union was found to be broadcasting a signal into the United States, and it was called the woodpecker signal because it went like a woodpecker, like that. And what it was doing was broadcasting information in this signal into the United States in an attempt to influence the perceptions and views and thoughts of the population. And what these scientists found is what this woodpecker signal was doing was connecting into the power grid, as they put it, being radiated by the power grid, given greater power. And it was going into the homes and being broadcast into the homes through the light fittings. Now, that was a case of hacking in to an electricity grid and light fittings that were not purpose-built to do that. They just hacked into the electricity grid as it has been up to this point. What the smart grids are, and these ludicrous light bulbs, they are a purpose-built delivery system of subliminal information into every home and every business within the frequency range of human brain activity. Thus, they are not only a constant surveillance on everything that's happening in your house, they are also feeding you subliminal thoughts and impacting upon your opinions and your perception of self and the world. This is what's happening. And people may laugh, and I really don't care. People laughed at a lot of things I said a long time ago, and they're not laughing now because they're happening. This is what we're faced with. And this is the reason why these light bulbs are so ludicrous in terms of being used in homes and businesses, both in terms of or in terms of the light they give off, rubbish, in terms of the chemicals and radiation they give off, and in terms of the mercury inside them, which has to be disposed of. The reason they're pushing these, despite all of that, is because the real reason for them is not light. Mm-hmm. It's delivering subliminal information into your home and business 24/7.
Hvala, Davide. Ja sam mislio da je bila strašna vijest u novinama koju sam pročitao o njemačkom laboratoriju koji je ustanovio da nikako te žarulje ne smiju biti kraj glave i da se prosto treba provjetravati, što je doista pomalo čudan naputak za žarulje koje bismo trebali koristiti u svojim sobama, ali stvar je očito dublje od toga, kao i mnoge druge koje danas uopće nismo stigli reći. Ali informacije su okolo. Hvala vam još jednom i do neke sljedeće prilike. Vidimo da se vraćate u Zagreb uvijek iz početka. Nadamo se da to neće prestati, ili se bar nadamo da će prestati ako nestanu razlozi za to. Što isto nije loš razlog.
Oh, I'm sure we will, yeah.
Hvala vama na pažnji. Otvorite oči, napnite uši, pa i sami provjerite nije li svijet malo drugačiji od onog što znate o njemu, ili možda doista potpuno suprotnost onoga što ste oduvijek o njemu znali ili mislili. A u međuvremenu, ili barem do sutra ujutro, laku noć.